In a remote stretch of the New Mexico desert lies a hidden town full of secrets. Secrets that almost no one will share on camera. At the center of that town lies Zorro Ranch, a sprawling, nearly 10,000-acre compound with a much darker story than most people realize. The truth about this massive estate is that it was built by one of the most notorious predators of our time. While the world dissected island flight logs, tabloid exposés, and leaked email lists, this $24 million desert fortress has somehow managed to slip past nearly every major headline about Jeffery Epstein. But Zorro Ranch was, and still remains, one of the most crucial parts to everything Jeffery Epstein was trying to create. Zorro Ranch wasn't just tucked away. It was engineered to be untouchable, heavily guarded, protected by secrecy, and isolated from the outside world. But here's where it gets strange. While the rest of his empire continues to be exposed, the private town he built in the sand remains strangely untouched. Unlike his Manhattan townhouse or his private island, Zorro Ranch was never raided. It was never fully searched, and it never received the scrutiny you would fully expect. Not even close. But here's the thing. We want answers. Why did he choose New Mexico for his largest and most remote compound? What happened there that requires so much secrecy? And why, despite everything, was it never fully investigated? Many people assume that Epstein's story starts in New York and ends on Epstein Island. But Zorro Ranch is a different chapter entirely, one still waiting to be opened. For every single thing we know about Zorro Ranch, there's 100 more questions we still don't have answers to. But the outright refusal of transparency surrounding this place is pretty telling. Now, what makes Zorro Ranch really interesting isn't just the confirmed facts. It's the amount and the type of claims that people have made about what happened here and some prominent figures allegedly involved. Although many allegations that name Zorro Ranch have not yet been proven in court, it remains one of the most mysterious parts of Epstein's story and one of the most unsettling chapters in this entire investigation. When I heard the name Zorro Ranch, I kind of pictured the Ponderosa, or like the Dutton Ranch on Yellowstone. But I need you to think bigger, like a lot bigger. Jeffrey Epstein once bragged that his ranch in New Mexico made his Manhattan townhouse look like a shack. When a guy with unlimited access to private jets says that his house in the desert makes his city penthouse look tiny, you should probably take note. With all of the power, money, and resources at his literal fingertips, why did he choose this remote location 30 miles outside of Santa Fe? This ridiculously lavish village featured multiple guest houses, luxury stables for horses, a 4,400-foot airstrip, helipad, and airplane hangar. It also had its own private firehouse and even an antique rail line. It was quiet and extremely vast and carefully engineered to prevent outsiders from seeing what was actually happening on the inside. We know that Jeffrey Epstein purchased this property from the former New Mexico Governor Bruce King for about $12 million. But the property alone just wasn't enough. Over the years, Epstein would go on to expand his privacy perimeter by leasing more than 1,200 acres of adjacent state trust land through a shell company called Cypress Inc., supposedly for agricultural purposes. Except there was a small problem. The evidence doesn't show the existence of herded livestock ever existing on his property, and nothing on record has ever indicated that even so much as a handful of green beans was ever harvested. Listen, it's one thing to pour millions of dollars into 10,000 acres of land you don't really even use, but it makes almost zero sense to add another 1,200 acres around it. And get this, New Mexico has a whole system in place for leasing state trust land, but Epstein somehow managed to hold onto his state land leases for more than 2 decades without following any of the rules. The state requires things like appraisals, declaring agricultural use, and passing routine inspections. But like I mentioned, there was no grazing operation or anything that even remotely resembled agricultural use. As it turns out, Epstein and his longtime partner, Ghislaine Maxwell, actually signed the land appraisals themselves. And when state inspectors showed up to verify all of this, Epstein and Maxwell refused to give them access. It really wasn't until 2019 when the pressure around the Epstein case really started to explode. The New Mexico Land Commissioner, Stephanie Garcia Richard, finally canceled the leases.
We are officially canceling the leases with the Zorro Ranch. and start the scene.
But by that point, Epstein had already enjoyed more than 20 years of additional state-sanctioned privacy. And now that brings us to the next question. Why would anyone need to heighten the level of isolation around an already fortified compound? Well, according to witness accounts, there's a pretty upsetting rhyme to Epstein's reason. Zorro Ranch successfully functioned as a completely closed system, which gave powerful individuals the ability to fly in undetected, stay hidden, and leave without ever appearing on public radar. Escaping wasn't just difficult, it was damn near unthinkable. Let's get one thing straight. Zorro Ranch was never meant to feed livestock. It was meant to feed power. Epstein was building a hierarchy, a network of people that needed him, protected him, and maybe even owed him. The state leases were simply a convenient cover story that allowed him to expand his footprint without ever raising a single eyebrow. Every single inch of that ranch served a purpose. Privacy for the elite, control over the vulnerable, and mutual silence from anyone who stepped foot inside those gates. The isolation was not a coincidence. It was the whole point. Think about it for a second. When you're 30 miles from the nearest city, surrounded by thousands and thousands of acres of empty land, you can kind of do whatever you want, right? Who's really gonna know? It's clear that Zorro Ranch was built for secrecy, not scenery. But the real story lies in the details. Survivor testimony, insider accounts, and official records all seem to point in the same direction. A direction that's really dark and disturbing, and almost impossible to explain away. Over the years, people have described the same pattern, just in different ways, which all circles back to this. Zorro Ranch was designed to hide people. Former employees at the ranch remember Epstein's guests flying in at weird hours, which made it really difficult for guests to be identified. There were certain rooms in the mansion that employees were forbidden to enter. Employees were also told not to ask questions, not to look too long, and never, under any circumstances, approach the main house uninvited. The staff seemed to work on a need-to-know basis, and conveniently, they never needed to know. The ranch was massive, dare we say absurdly massive, but it was consistently ran on a skeleton crew. That doesn't seem super normal, does it? That's what I thought. But what it does seem is pretty darn intentional. Survivors describe Zorro as a place where Epstein felt untouchable, a place where he believed no one would come looking, no one would question his guests, and no one would stumble into something they shouldn't see. Unfortunately, he wasn't wrong. Virginia Giuffre, one of the most outspoken survivors in the entire Epstein case, gave sworn testimony that Zorro Ranch was the location where Epstein and his associates abused her. And when her 2016 deposition became public, it included high-profile names of people she claims participated in the abuse. People like Prince Andrew and Woody Allen, and even the former governor of New Mexico, Bill Richardson. All of these men have denied her allegations, but some of their visits to the ranch have in fact been confirmed. Digging into Epstein's political footprint in New Mexico reveals something else you probably would expect: money. And a lot of it. Here's where things get real interesting. In 2006, Epstein poured $50,000 into Governor Bill Richardson's election campaign. Then he gave another $50,000 to Attorney General Gary King, an additional $10,000 to the State Land Commissioner, and $2,000 to the Santa Fe County Sheriff. Are campaign donations illegal? No, not exactly. But given everything we now know about Epstein and Zorro Ranch, it doesn't exactly scream innocence either. Virginia Giuffre wasn't the only survivor who named Zorro Ranch. Chauntae Davies also gave sworn testimony describing the ranch as a sophisticated operation of rape, exploitation, and manipulation. Another victim, identified as Jane Doe, said she was trafficked to the ranch at just 15 years old. Another woman, known as Priscilla Doe, testified that she was coerced into sex acts at the ranch between 2007 and 2010. And other victim accounts go even further back to 1996. Survivors have said again and again that New Mexico was not a vacation spot or even a secondary hideout for Epstein. It was a central engine of Epstein's operation. And yet, despite the volume of testimony and the consistency of these accounts, the state of New Mexico has barely responded. Listen to this. After Epstein's 2008 conviction in Florida, where he served 13 months for procuring a minor for prostitution, he moved to New Mexico, where he should have been listed on New Mexico's sex offender registry. And for a very brief moment, it looked like he would be. The state added him. And then 2 days later, he was quietly removed from the list, not New Mexico. With all due disrespect, expect, and I sincerely mean that. Why? Believe it or not, a loophole. Or at least that's the official story. New Mexico only required registration for offenses involving victims under 16 years old. Epstein's victim in Florida was 17. To make matters even worse, officials did not send Epstein this removal notice by email or even snail mail. They called him personally and reassured him that he didn't actually need to register after all. Wasn't that nice? Even though Epstein had a felony conviction in another state, New Mexico seemed way more focused on reassuring him than protecting the public. The message was loud and clear. Whatever he was doing in the desert, the state wasn't going to interfere. So at the very least, they let a man with an overinflated God complex feel even more invincible. Just think about what that signaled to him and his victims. Maybe the question we should be asking is, did Epstein choose New Mexico, or did New Mexico choose to look away? It's probably a little of both. Despite the overwhelming amount of survivor testimony and global outrage, every red flag in the Zorro Ranch stratosphere continues to be ignored. It's been literal decades since the first allegations were made. Yet this particular piece of Epstein's property has never been fully searched and never treated like a crime scene, which feels like a crime in itself. Whatever the reason, it's clear that Zorro Ranch wasn't chosen at random. It served a purpose, a terrible one, which is exactly why we need to look at who spent time there and why investigators didn't. What happened to Zorro Ranch after Epstein died is a timeline almost stranger than the events beforehand, and it really begins in the days leading up to his death and the days shortly after. 2 days before Epstein was found dead, he updated his will suddenly and pretty quietly, transferring all assets, including Zorro Ranch, into a private trust designed to make tracing ownership nearly impossible. Shortly after his death, even more disturbing information started to surface. According to the New York Times, Epstein openly told renowned scientist and some of his esteemed associates that he wanted to use Zorro Ranch as the base to a eugenics-style project. He planned to impregnate as many women as possible to seed the human race with his DNA. Disgusting. Super disgusting. But multiple associates of Epstein's claimed he had talked about this plan for many years. I hate to say it, but Zorro Ranch really would have been the perfect place for something of this caliber. Clearly, it's isolated enough to run a shady scientific facility without insider knowledge or legal oversight. Luckily, that didn't happen, but it's certainly no thanks to New Mexico or its state authorities. Locals say law enforcement presence on Zorro Ranch Road stayed relatively non-existent in the months and years following his death, just like before. Some journalists did try on-site investigations, but all they really found were locked gates, no trespassing signs, and staff members fully committed to strict NDA terms. The massive estate in New Mexico remained in legal limbo until about 2020, when it was listed for a cool $27.5 million. It was finally sold in 2023 for an undisclosed amount. But not a single red penny of those undisclosed millions has gone directly back to any of his victims. Thanks to New Mexico's non-disclosure laws, the new buyer's identity is another unanswered question that remains virtually untraceable. However, what I did find in public records is that the purchase was made under a 2-week-old entity called San Rafael Ranch LLC, and they rebranded and renamed Zorro Ranch with a quickness. Jeffery Epstein was known to frequent his 5 personal estates around the world: New Mexico, New York, US Virgin Islands, Florida, and France. Yet, only one of those locations still remains untouched by federal authorities. Here's the truth. Zorro Ranch did not become less mysterious after Epstein's alleged death. In fact, it seems to have become an even bigger and more protected mystery as time goes on. Even with all the testimony and evidence we currently have, there's so much critical information that remains largely unknown. State legislators might have the power to fix what's wrong, but survivors have moral authority. Their courage alone has done more to bring the truth to light than any institution has done for them in all 50 states. Zorro Ranch is just one part of a much larger network of power, secrecy, and all of these unanswered questions. And the deeper you go, the stranger and more revealing the story becomes. If you want to explore more scandals, hidden truths, and uncover secrets that most people will never see, make sure you subscribe, because when the world tries to hide its dirty little secrets, I'll be right there to uncover them.